Babyface, 1933. Let's begin with a true legend. Babyface wasn't merely controversial. It was the movie that gave censorship boards nightmares and nearly shut down Hollywood's anything-goes era all by itself. Picture this. Barbara Stanwyck at the height of her power, portraying Lily Powers, a woman who relies on every bit of her intelligence, charm, and fearless ambition to escape poverty. She works her way upward by captivating, outmaneuvering, and overwhelming a long line of powerful men until she reaches the top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The film doesn't simply suggest how she gets there. It practically announces it. Scene after scene shows doors closing behind her as she rises higher, leaving broken relationships and ruined careers along the way. And this is where things became explosive. The film was so bold and unapologetic about Lily's tactics that censors demanded drastic cuts. The original version disappeared almost immediately. For decades, the only version available was a heavily edited one that removed much of its bite. The uncensored print was believed lost until a copy appeared in the Library of Congress in the early 2000s. When viewers finally saw the film as it was originally made, many were stunned. What made it so alarming wasn't only the plot, it was the attitude. The movie seemed to challenge every attempt at moral judgment, inviting audiences to support a woman who followed her own rules and succeeded. Critics labeled it immoral, and religious groups strongly condemned it. Yet despite the uproar, Babyface endured. In fact, it eventually became a symbol for film preservation efforts. Today, it is widely celebrated as one of the most daring films from the pre-code era, reminding us that the stories Hollywood once tried hardest to hide are sometimes the most powerful. The story of Temple Drake, 1933. If Babyface felt like a slap to the censors, the story of Temple Drake was more like a direct knockout punch. Adapted from William Faulkner's controversial novel Sanctuary, the film didn't just hint at taboo topics. It brought them directly into the spotlight. Miriam Hopkins plays Temple Drake, a privileged Southern woman whose life spirals into chaos after one reckless night leads her into a brutal world filled with crime, corruption, and moral uncertainty. For audiences in 1933, the material was explosive. The film addressed subjects that were considered completely unacceptable at the time: sexual coercion, abduction, and the collapse of social privilege. Some scenes are still disturbing today, presenting implied violence so intense that critics of the era struggled even to describe them in print. Many Southern communities banned the movie entirely. Paramount, fearing the backlash, quickly removed it from circulation and locked it away in studio vaults. For many years, the film was rarely seen. When historians eventually rediscovered it, they were amazed it had ever slipped past censors at all. What made it so controversial was its harsh and complicated view of society. Instead of presenting a clean moral lesson, it showed a world that was messy and deeply uncomfortable. Temple herself is neither a simple victim nor a stereotypical fallen woman. She's a complex character forced to survive in a hostile environment, reacting with a mix of fear, determination, and resilience. The film's underlying message is clear. The most difficult stories are often the ones that matter most. For decades, however, Hollywood was too uneasy to let audiences confront it. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. Imagine Jean Harlow flashing a mischievous smile while marching through high society with absolutely no sense of shame. Red-Headed Woman isn't just a film. It's a gleeful challenge to polite morality wrapped in sharp humor and glamour. Harlow plays Lil, a secretary who refuses to remain in the background. Instead, she pursues the boss, flirts with powerful men, and manipulates every opportunity that crosses her path. With wit and bold confidence, she schemes and seduces her way toward wealth and status. The script doesn't hold back. At one point, Lil smashes a rival with a bottle. Later, she's discovered in bed with a married lover, and the man's wife ends up thrown out of her own home. The movie delights in breaking social rules, knocking down one taboo after another. Audiences in 1932 either found it hilarious or were deeply shocked. Censors, however, were furious. The film was banned in the United Kingdom for 3 decades, and many American cities refused to screen it. Eventually the studio withdrew it, and for years it survived mainly through bootlegs or rare revival showings. What makes it especially striking is that the story never punishes Lil for her behavior. She faces no dramatic downfall, no moral lecture, and no final repentance. Instead, she gets the last laugh. In a time when movies insisted that bad women had to suffer consequences, Lil walks away victorious. When critics rediscovered the film decades later, many recognized how far ahead of its time it truly was. Today it's considered a landmark of the pre-code era, boldly suggesting that women could pursue desire and success without apology. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Anyone who thinks modern Hollywood is easily offended should look at the panic caused when Island of Lost Souls premiered. Inspired by H.G. Wells's novel The Island of Dr. Moreau, the film delivered a chilling blend of horror, science fiction, and disturbing imagery. Charles Laughton portrays Dr. Moreau, a cruel scientist ruling over a remote island where he performs brutal experiments, transforming animals into grotesque human-like creatures. The film's atmosphere is thick with fear, sweat, and menace. Censorship boards were outraged. In Britain, the movie was banned entirely until the late 1950s. In the United States, it briefly slipped into theaters before the stricter production code took hold, but it soon disappeared from circulation. Some scenes were considered so disturbing that prints were reportedly cut apart or destroyed. For many years, the film existed mainly in rumor among horror enthusiasts. What frightened audiences so deeply wasn't just the monsters or the famous line, "Are we not men?" It was the film's brutal exploration of human arrogance and cruelty. Dr. Moreau represents the dark side of scientific ambition, the urge to dominate and manipulate life itself. Meanwhile, the creatures he creates are tragic figures caught between animal instinct and human awareness. The story offers little comfort. There is no neat resolution, no triumphant justice. Instead, the film leaves viewers with a haunting question about who the real monster truly is. When it was finally rediscovered, horror fans recognized it as a forgotten classic that still holds incredible power. 3 on a Match, 1932. Some films take hours to explore scandal and tragedy, but 3 on a Match packs an astonishing amount into a short runtime. Featuring Anne Dvorak, Joan Blondell, and Bette Davis, the movie follows 3 women whose lives take dramatically different paths after they reunite as adults. What begins as a nostalgic meeting quickly spirals into darker territory: addiction, infidelity, kidnapping, and hints of prostitution. One character in particular falls into a destructive world of crime and drugs, eventually becoming entangled with gangsters in a story that grows increasingly tragic. For audiences in 1932, this depiction of moral decline was shocking. Censorship boards worried that such realism threatened the idealized image of American womanhood. As a result, the film faced cuts, bans, and limited distribution in several regions. Eventually it disappeared from theaters and remained largely forgotten until film historians rediscovered it years later. What makes the movie remarkable is its honesty. Rather than preaching a moral lesson, it portrays the consequences of life choices with striking realism. Dvorak's character is especially heartbreaking. Not a villain, not a saint, but simply someone overwhelmed by circumstance. That sense of uncomfortable truth is exactly what alarmed censors at the time. When the film resurfaced decades later, it impressed a new generation of viewers and scholars, demonstrating how daring pre-code Hollywood could be when it explored the complicated realities of life. Call Her Savage, 1932. Move Aside, Gone with the Wind. If you're looking for real cinematic chaos, Call Her Savage squeezed more taboos into its 90 minutes than most films attempt in an entire career. The movie marked Clara Bow's major comeback, reminding audiences why she had once been known as the original It Girl. Bow plays Nasa Springer, a fiery and impulsive Texan who ignores every social rule in her path. Within the first minute she's fighting, riding broncos, and storming away from her own wedding. But the real shock lies in the subjects the story tackles. It touches on interracial relationships, illness, social scandal, and nightlife filled with questionable pleasures. NASA's life becomes increasingly turbulent as she faces disease, violence, and personal hardship. Even today, that combination of topics would be considered daring. In 1932, it was explosive. Censors reacted with disbelief, and local boards demanded extensive edits. The film was banned in certain cities and soon faded from distribution after its initial release. For many years it was believed lost entirely until damaged prints appeared during the 1970s. When modern audiences were finally able to watch it, they quickly understood why it had created so much attention. Bea isn't simply portrayed as a bad girl. She is layered, emotional, furious, fragile, and incredibly captivating. Call Her Savage is full of contradictions, and that is exactly what gives it authenticity. Hollywood may have attempted to hide it away, but the film's rebellious spirit is far too untamed to remain buried forever. The Bitter Tea of General Yen, 1933. If you want an example of Hollywood igniting a cultural controversy, Frank Capra's The Bitter Tea of General Yen is a perfect case. On the surface, it appears to be a sweeping romantic drama set during civil war in China. But a closer look reveals why the movie triggered panic among censors and was quietly pushed aside in studio history for many years. Barbara Stanwyck plays an American missionary who is captured by a charismatic warlord portrayed by Nils Asther, who, very much in the style of the 1930s, wears heavy yellow face makeup for the role. Yet the controversy was not only about casting. The story boldly explores power, temptation, and forbidden attraction between Stanwyck's missionary and Asther's General Yen. Their chemistry is intense and, for a pre-code production, surprisingly suggestive. In one famous moment, Stanwyck dreams of being carried into Yen's arms, shocking audiences who were not ready to see interracial desire depicted on screen. Censorship boards reacted harshly. Chicago banned the movie outright, while protests and boycotts appeared in several major cities. Some theaters refused to show it at all. Columbia shelved the film after its initial release, and it did not begin appearing regularly again until the late 20th century. For decades, the only way to see it was through rare festival showings or worn prints traded among collectors. So why was it such a big deal? Because The Bitter Tea of General Yen doesn't merely hint at taboo subjects, it confronts them directly. It refuses to punish its characters simply for their desires and invites viewers to question their own prejudices. In 1933, that level of honesty proved too daring for both Hollywood and American society. With time, however, Capra's gamble has been vindicated. Today the film is praised for its courage, complexity, and willingness to challenge conventions, proving that genuine art rarely stays buried forever. Murders in the Rue Morgue, 1932. Now things get strange. Murders in the Rue Morgue wasn't only controversial, it felt like a surreal nightmare pulled from the darkest corner of Universal's horror collection, featuring Bela Lugosi at his most unhinged. Inspired loosely by Edgar Allan Poe's famous tale, the film follows a mad scientist, played by Lugosi, who abducts women and injects them with ape blood in an attempt to create a new form of humanity. If that premise sounds wild, it truly is. The movie feels like a late-night ghost story told by someone who has had far too much absinthe. What makes it even more unsettling is its relentless atmosphere. The film's vision of Paris is filled with fog, shadows, and lurking danger. For audiences in 1932, the violence felt disturbingly graphic. Lugosi's character is cruel and sadistic, tormenting victims in ways that made even seasoned viewers uncomfortable. Universal cut some of the harshest moments before release, but that still wasn't enough for censors in parts of Europe and the American South. Several countries banned the film completely, and many American cities demanded additional edits. After its initial theatrical run, the studio quietly withdrew it from circulation. For years, the uncut version was almost mythical, something horror fans whispered about at conventions. Controversy stemmed from the fact that Murders in the Rue Morgue aimed not just to frighten audiences but to deeply disturb them, raising unsettling questions about how far science might go before becoming madness. That was not a topic polite society in 1932 wanted to confront. During the horror revival of the 1970s, the movie finally gained appreciation as the bizarre and twisted classic it had always been. It remains a powerful reminder that pre-code Hollywood was not afraid to venture into dark territory. Employees' Entrance, 1933. If you want to understand how toxic workplace culture could appear in the early 1930s, look no further than Employees' Entrance. The film presents capitalism with brutal honesty. Its depiction of corporate life is so ruthless that it almost feels like a horror story disguised as a workplace drama. Warren William plays Kurt Anderson, the manager of a department store who operates without compassion or ethics. He isn't simply a strict boss. He is a manipulative and predatory figure who fires employees on a whim and ignores every moral boundary. Yet the story goes beyond office conflicts. It explores the darker side of authority and ambition, revealing how Anderson's drive damages lives both in the workplace and in private. Loretta Young portrays a vulnerable shopgirl who becomes entangled in Anderson's world. Her fate shaped by his readiness to use people and discard them once they are no longer useful. The film pulls no punches, showing affairs, manipulation, emotional collapse, and a workplace so ruthless that survival itself feels uncertain. This is the pre-code era at full force. Audiences were shocked, but censors and studio executives were even more alarmed. The message felt too raw and too realistic. In many cities the movie was removed from theaters, and after the production code began strict enforcement, it largely disappeared from public view for many years. Among film enthusiasts it became almost legendary, mentioned in books but rarely seen. Only during the pre-code revival did it return to attention, reminding viewers that classic Hollywood could be just as honest and savage as modern cinema. What is striking is how contemporary the film still feels. Its themes of corporate exploitation, workplace abuse, and gender power struggles could easily reflect today's headlines. Controversy, after all, never truly ages. It simply finds new victims. Employees' Entrance dared to show uncomfortable truths, and Hollywood tried to hide it away. Scarface, 1932. When most people think of the most infamous gangster film ever made, they usually picture the Al Pacino version. But the real trailblazer arrived decades earlier. The original Scarface, released in 1932, shook censors and critics alike. Directed by Howard Hawks and produced by Howard Hughes, the movie was so intense and provocative that it sparked years of debate and government attention. Paul Muni portrays Tony Camonte, a character clearly inspired by Al Capone, who tears through Chicago amid gunfire, betrayals, and shocking violence. Yet the film is more than a simple crime thriller. It serves as a harsh critique of American ambition, corruption, and the way society glamorizes criminals. The body count is enormous, and the movie revels in its chaos. Machine guns blazing, cars racing through the streets, and a chilling indifference toward human life. The pace is relentless and stylish. Censors reacted strongly. City after city attempted to ban or heavily edit the movie. So many alternate versions were created that several cuts circulated, some including moralizing endings where Tony ultimately pays for his crimes, while others remained far more uncompromising. For decades the original version, the one showing just how fearless pre-code Hollywood could be, remained difficult to find. Film historians and collectors searched for surviving prints until proper restorations eventually appeared. Watching Scarface today makes it clear why it frightened authorities. The film both celebrates excess and exposes its consequences, refusing to spare anyone, including the audience. Over time it became a legend that later gangster films still try to match. So there you have it. 10 pre-code movies so daring that they were locked away and left to gather dust, largely because they dared to present uncomfortable truths. It raises an interesting question. What subjects might we still be too afraid to show on screen today? Let us know in the comments. What is the most controversial film you have ever seen? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more forgotten classics and cinematic deep dives. Until next time, keep questioning and keep watching.